Good evening, lovelies, or morning, or afternoon, or whenever you happen to be listening or watching. But it actually happens to be evening as I'm filming this, which for a podcast called MoonTime Munchies, I haven't done that often. Anyway, today's episode is all about self-acceptance versus self-improvement. And I think that is an issue that not only have I sort of turn the tables on in my own life this year, but I think it's something that my generations had to face a lot. I think that I come from a very empathic and self-sacrificing generation. Not that that is, better than, any other way of being. It's most often a trauma response. And I think that that's an accumulative societal kind of generational trauma. The generations prior had to be very self-serving for survival, and that kind of led us to be very self-sacrificing to have our needs met, and that's not necessarily healthy either, and it's something that we have to unlearn, because as I've mentioned in many prior episodes, that kind of self-sacrifice not only leads to more relationships that take, but an inability to fuel oneself and to feel content and even deserving or a match to something healthy. So that's not necessarily a healthier approach. It just happens to be my generation's cross to bear. So how do we switch from this constant need for self-improvement and to change to actually loving who we are, and also acknowledge that we will forever be changing? It is human nature to evolve, to learn, and I've mentioned before that I believe that the human condition is the pursuit of knowledge. It is not knowing, because knowing implies that there's an end, and there's a constant evolution to humanity's consciousness, and each new thing is meant to contradict the next. In one of my last episodes, I talked about non-duality, and I talked about, pretty much everything that I've had to heal in myself was an attachment to a duality, to a polarity, because in attaching to one end of the spectrum or another, there is like a repellent to the other polarity. But in all actuality, every single thing that seems black and white, that seems like it has an opposite, is on a spectrum, and there's this piece in the middle, and following what lights you up is the path to peace, because maybe you'll be a little bit more on this side of this spectrum and a little bit more on that side of this spectrum. But if you are to chastise or try to logically sort out the morality of each side and try to fit every single thing into a little box, you're just hurting everyone else on this other percentage of the spectrum, when in all actuality, all things are one. Even something as simple as seemingly black and white as life and death. You cannot have life without death. You cannot conceptualize or appreciate either without its counterpart. And there is a sort of ebb and flow of both. A lot of living people experience different things, of signs from angels, dreams of their loved ones, seeing ghosts, and then also in life there's a lot of ego death. There's a lot of death of different characters we play and different versions of ourselves that we are, and grieving parts of ourselves that we will never be again. Also, in that last podcast, I mentioned the paper that won the Nobel Peace Prize in physics this year. And in that paper, right in the beginning, it states that probably the most fundamental law of quantum mechanics is that within any entanglement, any particles entering such said entanglement cannot be perceived as they once were. It is in our encounters, in our exchanges, that we transform fundamentally, and we cannot be defined as we once were. That's in any relationship, any energy exchange. We are constantly evolving. So then the human condition becomes allowing those polarities to complement, to contradict, to challenge perspective, to continue like breaking down the universe into more unique expressions. Like, I believe ourselves to have this consciousness, this wisdom, this ability to manifest because we are our consciousness creation reflected. We are a mirror image and a unique expression. We are grand and so small. And I think that of all things, and I like to think of our continued expansion as a species, our ability for art and science and philosophy and all different concepts that seem like they contradict one another, actually continue to expand and inform one another. And I like to think of this chaotic web of all things that I love finding puzzle pieces in, and figuring out how the world works, whether it be through art, through spirituality, through science, as a continuously refracting and becoming more beautiful kaleidoscope. Like, the vision of the world is just getting more and more complex, but like this crystalline structure is like, it's like a diamond, it's like snow, it's like ice, it's like this just beautiful, divine crystalline structure. And that's how I see the world, honestly. So how does this get back to self-improvement versus self-acceptance? Well, I think, again, we have this idea that, especially for my generation in particular, that we have to constantly we have this ego attachment to this evolution, to this expansion, and we try to define it, to put it in these boxes, to stick to one polarity when one doesn't necessarily mean the other. Like, I went into this meeting a couple months ago, and they were like, there are a lot of women here, so we have quite a bit of drama. And I'm like, I'm sorry, does in your brain, do those equate? Are those synonyms? Does one define the other? Like, why did you say that in the same sentence? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. And I think that's, we make assumptions off of, people's characters, and yeah, there is a safety to that. There's a biological response to judgment for survival. But it's in the adhering to that, in the trying to intellectualize and over-explain and justify our assumptions, that we just make ourselves and those that we have relationships more miserable than allowing the space to not know and to possibly figure out someday, and to let other people define space, and to just feel and experience and witness and see what things end up being. And in my personal journey, I had to work a lot on self-concept, where a lot of, like, I could manifest here and there, but a lot of the things that I truly cared about were difficult to obtain because I had very poor self-concept, and that came from trauma. I had very poor self-worth, and I didn't believe myself worthy of the career I desired, the love I desired, of the type of home and the type of friendships I desired. And my healing journey became one where I was actually reviewing some divine diaries that I filmed like 6 months ago that are about to come out now. And when I was realizing this for the first time, but I viewed every step of the healing process like, okay, now I'm a little bit more worth it. Now I'm a little bit more the person I want to be. And I think that that's a thing that we misinterpret as children as well, where we have this like very black and white view, even if we're, not taught that from a lot of us have a lot of very black and white families where they're like, this is this way and this is that way, and that's just how it is. You are never, yada, 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 But children very much do think like that. In fact, like, infants don't even know that you're separate than them. Like, for the first, I think it's year, maybe year and a half, a baby will believe they are the same as their mother still, like the same identity. And I think it's up to 3 years old where a child doesn't understand that you might know things that they don't. Like, I believe an ape has the same level of consciousness at that point, where, and I guess consciousness is the wrong word, because we all know very like old soul wise children that like remember past lives and things like that. So maybe consciousness is not the right word, but like self-awareness, self-concept, just autonomy of self, maybe, where they like, you know that there happens to be M&Ms in the cabinet. If they like don't see them and don't know that, they think you don't know that. They think that it just doesn't exist, and you don't know things that they don't know. Like, you can only see what they can see, and you can only know what they can know. So when an infant doesn't get its fundamental needs met, it very concretely develops a very primary part of the ego, where the child does not believe that they are worthy of getting those needs met, or they would be having them met. And that can cause this very alien-like feeling. A lot of us with a neglect trauma background can have difficulty with the development of the superego, where what is healthy and what is unhealthy kind of blends together. Like, a lot of us can feel very empowered by like fantasy or hero movies. Why do you think they're so popular right now? Or in spirituality, have this, once we start to heal, like, we very much want others to feel that good, but we also feel like again, like a sense of superiority. And don't get me wrong, like, I have spiritual beliefs where those could be easily misinterpreted as well, where, yeah, I think there are old souls, and I think that a lot of children do choose their parents, and that you can have a mission to, like, for me personally, I'm really passionate about validating people's feelings and experiences and making education accessible. And I think it's, again, very fundamental to the human condition to strive for a sense of purpose. But I think that that is not only unique to each individual, but also ever evolving, even within one lifetime. And I keep thinking of that song that was on the Midnight's album that Taylor said, did you notice my coherent narcissism disguised as altruism? I believe that's the line. And the fact that she also sings Tale as Old as Time right after that is hilarious, because, again, everything's on a spectrum. Everything has these dualities. And I think that that's what you sign up for as an artist, is that inherent hypocriticism. Whew, I can't speak. Where no matter what you do, you also do the opposite. And if you really like read into anything, you can always bring it back to the exact polarity of it. Like, the fact that our ancestors had to fight so much for their own survival and well-being made them relatively narcissistic, technically, and that makes us very self-sacrificing, which in turn has narcissistic tendencies. You know, like, there's, psychology is kind of a trip like that when you really get into it. And I mean, that's just one avenue. That can be true of every study of science, every philosophical belief, every spiritual belief, even all art. It gets, no matter what the message is, it gets back to the point of what triggered that feeling to begin with, which was the opposite of it. And that's why we need contrast. We need polarities, is to spark in our souls the desire to go towards what resonates with us personally more. And that's why I find so much peace in the non-duality of it all. And, you know, whether that means I'm in the middle of the spectrum on beliefs or not, say I feel more, again, this way or that way on a particular topic, I don't chastise the other polarity. And I also don't feel one without feeling entirely informed on the other. Like, again, it depends on the topic. Like, sometimes things just feel better. Some things you just intuitively, instinctually know are for you personally. But when it comes to things that are based more in fact, or things that we have substantial evidentiary support for, I try to be thoroughly informed on the opposing belief, especially if I feel something strong enough to not only have a belief that's opposing another, but even furthermore, make it a public one. I started talking again and it wasn't recording. So I've reached this really satisfying, oh my goodness, maybe I shouldn't record these at night. This very satisfying point in my life where, honestly, I know I said that correctly this time, but it sounded the same in my head. Where I don't want to ever stop growing or learning or expanding. To me, it's exciting, it's fulfilling. I think that although it's going to be unique and different for every single one of us, I think it's all of our collective purpose, and yet it's our unique purposes at the same time. It's, again, everything is one and the same. And that means there's going to be no perfect Morgan Daley. There's going to be no final end point. I even had an entirely separate title concept for a podcast called How to Be a Masterpiece and a Work in Progress at the same time. Because truly, we all are. And I had reached a point this year, months and months ago, where I realized I was always deserving of the things that I desired. And although my healing and personal transformation made me more and more ready for it, I always deserved it, and I still do. And now I have this, again, stronger self-concept where I am the woman I've always wanted to be, and yet I become more and more like her every day. And that means accountability and effort and, again, personal evolution. But I don't have to put who I want to be on a pedestal or on the back burner any longer. And I think that's the key between finding a balance between self-acceptance and self-improvement. It's perspective on who you are and your own self-worth. And again, neglect has this funny way of entangling itself. Again, we're getting back to particle entanglement in our ego and fundamentally changing us so that we are no longer what we could be defined as before, where we truly identify with how much we can show up for others, how much we can do for others, how much we can tangibly receive as evidence of our own value. And those things, again, just like that meeting, one does not mean the other. And I think that there's a lot of peace that I found in that and we're taught the opposite, even without familial trauma or, society or generational trauma or whatever it is. Like, there are only certain marketable emotions. If you don't, have any distaste for a part of your body, you're not going to buy all these cosmetics and all of this, diet pills. And then we have these, I can go on a whole different tangent of quick fixes and how we don't cure illnesses, we fight symptoms, and that will be a whole other podcast episode. But, it's hard to take advantage and have people fork over their life source energy and their lifetime without making them feel inadequate or unsafe or threaten a fundamental human right like safety or wellness or love or respect or autonomy of selves or whatever that freedom is, that basic human right is, the right to love ourselves, to choose how we want to spend our time and energy. And the fact of the matter is, this comes from other broken people, from other misled people that think that their power, their time, their money, their resources have to come from other people. And the thing about unconditional love, I've said in many episodes before, it's I can't hurt you without it hurting me. So yes, you have to fill your own cup and allow it to overflow into others instead of completely pouring yourself out into others. But in doing that, my helping you is not some business exchange. It's not tit for tat. It's not I owe you. It's not you bought breakfast, so I'll buy lunch. It's I'm here because I want to be, because I want to know who you are, because I want to care for you, because I enjoy your time and your energy and your space. And our continued self-sacrificing, I've used the phrase a million times, but contorting ourselves into the shape of something lovable, putting ourselves on a chopping block for others, we're becoming so not ourselves in service of others who don't even really understand what they want, that we lose ourselves. And when we finally get that little drop in the bucket in return for all of our efforts, it's unfulfilling because we weren't who we were to begin with. And again, those people who will love you for you can't find you if you're not being you. So if we were to truly follow what lights us up and do what we're meant to do, we fill the niche that we were born to fill, where it's highly improbable, statistically speaking, to even be a human. Never mind be the exact human you are in the circumstances you are with the resources or limitations that you have. And I know that they can be frustrating, but all is done with intention, all is done with reason, and nothing exists without a purpose, including you. You have a very exact reason to experience all the good and all the bad, to be all the good and all the bad that you are. And again, you know, being selfish, being aligned to self, to higher self, there is no egoic good or bad. They don't feel that pain. It's just balancing of energy. If you've noticed, even with a rise of power in the good, there is evil to counterbalance it. And it's not that one vibration's higher than another. Not to say that that doesn't play a role, because obviously absolutely everything is frequencies, so that obviously plays a role. But you know, just like here in the third dimension, there are good and bad people, in higher dimensions, higher frequencies, there are good and bad things too. Everything needs polarity. It needs that balancing on either end of the spectrum. So again, to attach any of these to our self-worth is absolutely ludicrous. So you can be, you know, 300 pounds today with purple hair and work at the bank and make however much a year, or you know, whatever, and then next year you can be 200 pounds with brown hair and work at the vet, and you know, none of these should change your value or who you are. So that has personally been my experience and my understanding in that, again, spectrum, and that teeter-totter, that balancing scales of self-acceptance versus self-improvement. I will never stop changing and evolving and improving who I am. And I think that's what's misleading, is the word improvement. I'm simply changing. And I look back now and I had so much hate and so much anger, and I never thought I did, because I never let myself feel those kind of heavy emotions. I was very bubbly and optimistic, and that was my coping mechanism through great pain. But I did have a lot of hate and a lot of anger towards who I was as a person. And I look back and I go, well, she was really smart and funny and pretty and talented, and you know, she tried really hard and she worked really hard and she cared so much. And that's all true of me. Little Morgan had a lot in common with me. And I shouldn't have been so hard on her. And, you know, I have good and bad days to this day, but, you know, I look back at that, and there's phases I went through where it was like, you know, this year I had really good style. And that year, I really love how I cared for my friends and I was really there for them. And this year I went on so many adventures and it was so much fun. And this year was really painful, and I'm really proud of how strong I was. Or this year I was academically challenged and I was, you know, really intellectual, and I think that that's so cool of me. And this year I got to try these things in the arts, and I got to express myself and advance my skill, and that was really cool. And I look back and we have this kind of nostalgia for the way things were. But again, we can never be defined as we once were after entanglement. And I have some song notes about the early 2000s and the nostalgia I have for them, because through my traumatic experience, I would look at the kind of pinnacle of commercialism that was my youth in the early 2000s. And I think of like Hollister and Abercrombie, and you have like the Twilight and the Vampire Diaries. Literally, I have Legacies paused on Netflix right now while I'm recording this. And even like the peak of Victoria's Secret. And I was talking to a family member in the car today, you know, about like the holiday season and all the commercialism and things like that. And I'm like, don't get me wrong, I'm vegan and I'm trying to learn about what, you know, environmentally conscious and cruelty-free products that I can change for my toiletries and home care and all of those kind of things. And I'm trying to learn more about like herbs and cyclically living and all these more natural things, you know, as I become more of an independent adult and get to make these choices for myself and my life and my body, as well as somebody who would like to be a parent someday and like to care for my soul family of friends and my significant other and all of these things. And, you know, even going further into like decor, and there's, you know, gift giving is not one of my love languages. However, I am very ADHD and I do get that dopamine response. Like there's always the joke, like if you get a new planner, you just want to like plan out your life and you get so excited and you like plan the whole year and then you crash and burn and don't have any energy to do anything. Or you get like a new blanket and you have to like clean your whole room and wash all of your bedding so that you could put it on there. And that's a huge motivating thing. Like I've decided to implement a sort of reward system for my habits and goals. And one of the options is getting things off of my Amazon or Etsy list, because those little things can really like motivate you, and there shouldn't be any shame in that. But I also really respect and admire the minimalistic life. I like having one thing of quality and of value when it comes to everything, like a, you know, good pair of jeans, and I love, even in style, I have a very like neutral color palette. I care more about like silhouettes than I do about like trends and frills and patterns. I like, you know, good fits and things that are timeless or, you know, relatively minimal. And even in design, I love the kind of like Scandinavian interior design that's just like so like nature and white and clean. And if you didn't notice by my feed and my content as of yet, I don't even know if that's the right way to say that sentence. I am tired, guys. But despite all of that, I really miss that, like you know, the phrase that they say, like, good brands sell feelings, not products. And that's entirely true. Like, you know, you look at any brand that's successful today, like I'm recording on Apple products. What is the feeling that Apple sells? Not like when you see a commercial, what is that they're evoking in you emotionally through their media? And I think that that's a huge part of why I got into media. Was I love the romanticizing life. I love the celebration of life. And so picking up on moods just from a candle, that too, but a camera angle or a lighting or, you know, the score of a movie. Like, honestly, let's be real, Twilight, that soundtrack shaped a generation. And I mean, so did the cinematography and all of the actors, and of course the writing. Like, it was, I'm a fan if you haven't noticed, but that soundtrack though. So I was talking about this commercialism and specifically Victoria's Secret, and I was like, don't get me wrong, like the labor that they used and the saying that like trans women weren't selling the fantasy, like all of these things that were clearly just morally unjust. Of course, their time away to rebrand, for lack of a better term, was very justified and needed to happen. And I'm proud of my generation for saying like, hey, we don't really want to advertise this non-inclusivity or promoting diet culture, for lack of a better term, or these labor conditions, or like, you know, the laundry list of things of why things needed to change with that company. However, I also really do miss the fantasy that they sell, if I'm being completely honest. And, you know, how those shows used to make you feel, and how you used to think that you could grow up and be that powerful or that beautiful, or that, again, image they sold. So I think with, you know, with this generation, we romanticize so many things, whether it be academia or our fashion can be even very fantasy-like. Another conversation I happened to have today with that same family member was, yeah, we have trends, like, you know, certain things always come back into style, but what I appreciate about this media generation is that we have access to examples of style from all of human history, and it's just at a touch of a fingertip. So we have people dressing like it's the Renaissance, and we have people dressing like it's the 70s, and we have people dressing in gremlin core. And I think that that's absolutely incredible, where, yeah, you can wear what's technically trendy right now, and to be honest, I don't even know what it is, but you can also wear absolutely anything and walk down the street and somebody's gonna be like, cute fit, you know? And I think that that's so cool. And putting it on social media, you're always gonna have a market. You're gonna have somebody who that lights their soul up. And it can be incredibly overstimulating to have so much at the touch of your fingers. I always think back to, you know, what we consume in a day is about the same amount of information that I believe, I'm not fact checking this, but that people during Shakespeare's time, it like took in their whole life. I'm sorry, I'm like stuttering. This is a lot. I'm very passionate about this. But yeah, it's incredible and overstimulating, the amount of things that we take in, and it can be harmful. Like, you think, if you think about what you scroll through on your For You page, and you see this person's cooking this, and this person's showing their OOTD, and then this person's posting about this tragedy somewhere in the world, and this person's posting about their baby laughing. Well, psychologically speaking, we grieve and mourn tragedy, and we're supposed to see these people that we see on the screen as people, and think, oh my God, they're in trouble, or they're dying, or like whatever the tragedy that's being posted about is. But then we scroll so quickly for that dopamine response, or the desire to neglect those feelings because we're overwhelmed and overstimulated with our day-to-day. And we scroll, and then we see a baby laughing, and just like birds chirping or singing, you can't really hear those things or do those things when a lion's chasing you. So your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn responses are just like, oh, okay, no, we're good now. And we never like mentally processed that pain, and those things are just all lingering in our subconscious and on a day-to-day, and we scroll past hundreds of these things. So as exciting as it is that we can make a whole Pinterest board, mine happens to be like, I think it's like 20,000 pins. Like, it's insane, categorized into like all of these folders. You know the type. It's me. It's me. I'm the problem. It's me. Yeah, I think that as exciting as it is to be able to, put out all of this content, honestly, it's kind of exhausting being somebody who does it, and I'm just beginning. But I mean, like, my best friend's my biggest cheerleader, because the amount that I'm doing with writing all of these projects and posting all of these things simultaneously, a lot of my favorite creators have a whole team, whether that be 5 people or 30 people behind them, to do the same things that I try to do every day. So yeah, is it a dream job? Is it an absolute luxury? Is it an artist's just biggest desire? Absolutely, wouldn't trade it for the world. But it's a lot of work, and it's really hard, and it's really overstimulating. And again, that is, drawing a parallel to our generation kind of getting to unpack all of these mental health concerns, where it's very invalidating, because a lot of prior generations have no common ground, never had the luxury of doing these things. So they don't know how hard it is, and they don't understand exactly what it is that we're unpacking. And so as much as like it's a dream to be able to create, it's also a huge responsibility and can be a burden at times. So I have these song notes about, like, I want to dress like some vampire's girlfriend and to smell like Hollister Abercrombie, and it's so campy. It's such a early 2000s throwback, talking about like football games and things. And I have this sense of nostalgia for something I truly didn't experience. I remember really falling into that romanticism in consumer culture. And I was like, someday when I am not in this unhealthy dynamic, and when I'm not in this, traumatic, abusive situation, I'm going to have this love, and I'm going to be able to learn and have a healthy school dynamic, and I'm going to be able to have a home that's this beautiful and this comforting, and all of those things that media sold to us, where they're gonna have this cologne, and you're gonna wear like this flannel PJ on the holidays, and you're going to look like this, and the whole shebang. Like, even in shows, like, you have those classic high school and college sitcoms, and oh my god, they're dating the football player and things like that. I went to a performing arts school. We didn't even have a regular cafeteria. We called our teachers by their first names. We did have a prom, but I never went to mine. And I realized that it wasn't just going to an art school. Like, I was taken out of school a lot because of the circumstances of my family, and I moved around a lot, and so I didn't have the opportunity of having like a lifelong best friend since I was a child, or going to those milestone things like prom, like going to the high school football game in the autumn. And I romanticized that, and I pedestaled that idea for so long. And we can, again, what lights us up is not a coincidence, even if it's not like a job or a calling or a person. Sometimes it is as simple as, this is my style, or this is my favorite fragrance, or this is something that feels like me. Like, we have a particular way we want to decorate our homes and decorate our bodies, and the things that we want to surround ourselves with, our favorite foods, and none of that's a coincidence, but a lot of it is attached to how we feel. And so we kind of, again, with the ego, misinterpret what nostalgia is. And we can never go back to the past. We can never have those exact circumstances again. But what it is our mind longing for those feelings again. And sometimes they need to be in a different form. You know, like if you had like a really strong, significant relationship and you went through like a terrible breakup and you went through that whole like grieving process and everything, and then all of a sudden when you're like healthy and and you're like happy and whole and on your own, whether you're dating or not, you might have this like nostalgia of like, oh my God, remember when I got to wear their jacket, and remember how big it was, how warm it was, how it smelled, like things like that, right? It's not that you necessarily are missing that person or that exact moment, but that feeling. What did that make you feel? Did that make you feel taken care of, nurtured, seen? You were validated in your desire or your need in that moment? And were you seen in a light that you feel like you identify with, and you want to feel seen for who you are again? You know, what was that feeling? Because, you know, sometimes we can have like common threads through our lives. Like maybe your favorite meal will always be spaghetti, and maybe in your lifetime that's always sustainable and doable. You always have your family recipe, and like that's a thing that's wonderful for you. And sometimes things change. In fact, that's really the only constant, is that things always change, and you do too. So the key to finding a balance between self-improvement and self-acceptance is accepting that you'll always be improving, that you'll always be a new version of yourself, and that you should be loved just the same. And that doesn't mean always the same expression. Sometimes in different phases of your life, you love different people, and you love in different ways, and you need different things. But your worthiness of it and your potential to attract it should be a constant. So, with all of that said, thank you all for spending your time and energy here with me today. As always, this has been my thoughts on some things. My name is Morgan Daley, and I'm on most platforms. Be kind, be mindful, and have a good day on purpose. Bye.